Kill not that within you which is cringe. Kill the part that cringes. Few anime heroes embody this philosophy. Who am I kidding? Most anime heroes embody that philosophy, but none pull it off with quite as much shameless panache as Sid Kageno.
してくる。限界なんだ。今すぐしないと走りながら垂れ流すことになる。
By day, he wears the meticulously manufactured mask of background character A at the magic sword school he got isekai'd into attending. But by night, he dons the pitch-black cloak of the Eminence in shadow. Mastermind behind a cadre of anomalously hot spandex-clad fightin' ladies known as Shadow Garden. And together, they hunt down members of a demonic conspiracy that's controlled the world from the shadows since ancient times. Or at least that's what he pretends is going on as he's beating up random bandits in accordance with his long-held childhood fantasy of leading the mysterious OP third faction of a Power Ranger type deal. What he doesn't realize is that none of his subordinates think they're just playing along with him, and neither does the demonic cult that's controlled the world from the shadows since ancient times. He only thinks he made all that stuff up, but Sid is a man who plays way harder than he works, so that's probably what's best for the long-term fate of the world, all things considered. And it's certainly what's best for us in the audience, since this show's bombastic action scenes go every bit as hard as he plays. Shadow isn't quite as absurdly powerful as your Son's Goku or Anos's Voldigode, but what he lacks in stopping power beyond the scale of a conventional nuclear warhead, he more than makes up for with sheer swagger. And I'm not just talking about the incredible animation. Anos may get to say some pretty badass lines like, "Did you really think stopping time would stop me?" But to him, those are all just statements of fact, not carefully rehearsed zingers. And by not caring enough to, for example, name any of his attacks, he kinda auto-loses a lot of cool points to even the slow, powerful buildup of a good Kamehameha! But even that's not intentional on Goku's part, it's just a byproduct of the entire Dragon world operating on wrestling logic. Among all the OP Protag-kuns, only Sid has the genre awareness and dedication to spend the countless hours posing in front of a mirror that it takes to come up with something as transcendentally cool as So remember, kids, it's not the size of your power level, it's what you do with it. Though, on that note, Sid Kageno doesn't really need to be able to solo an entire planet, because he's got something few other anime protagonists besides Ippo-kun can claim. A canonically massive What's more, he's a grower, not a shower, so it's a symbolically relevant massive And it's in such subtle narrative details that the Eminence in Shadow, the anime, not the guy, reveals its own staggering hidden power level. The genuine genius that underpins its absurdly trashy, self-indulgent story. Which we'll get into in a moment, but first, let me tell you how to shop like you're in another world, or at least another country, specifically Japan, with today's sponsor, Zen Market. It's never been better to be a Western weeb, but even in the age of streaming simulcast, there's still a ton of great stuff that just never makes it out of Japan. From brand new Poke Center and P Bandai exclusive merch to out-of-print figures and collectibles on Mercari and Yahoo auctions, a lot of very cool Japanese things are simply out of reach for anyone who doesn't live or vacation there. Or they would be, if not for Zen Market, a shopping service that can help you get almost anything from over 10,000 stores across Japan. Beyblades, model kits, dojins and dakimakura, retro games and consoles, you name it, they can hook you up with it. And with free parcel consolidation shipped through the service of your choosing, they can hook you up with a heck of a lot of it all at once without straining your wallet. Not only is Zen Market registration totally free, but they'll give you a 300 yen gift just for signing coming up. And for the rest of this month, they're offering an additional 5% cash back on everything you buy from Rakuten between Wednesdays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. JST. They also set up a special landing page just for you Mother's Basement fans with direct links to merch from your favorite anime and other cool stuff that might interest you. So all you gotta do is click that link in the doobly-doo to get shopping today. Anyway, while it seems at first glance to be tossing ideas about willy-nilly purely for the sake of humor and fan service, Eminence in Shadow is one of those rare, optimally efficient anime that truly uses every part of the narrative buffalo, Willy included. Hell, it even finds a narrative purpose for the wrapper around all that ground bison meat. Actually, sorry, it's probably cow or some fantasy equivalent in those burgers. Got a little carried away with my own metaphor there. But nonetheless, my point still stands. It's really cool how the increasing prominence of burgers and burger wrappers in the back half of the series, A, provides evidence of the increasing influence of Shadow Garden via their Mitsugoshi Company front, B, highlights how different this world's culture is from our own, with fast food being a high-class novelty there, and C, creates a symbolic through line for when Rose is stripped of the last shreds of her old life and becomes number 666 at the story's conclusion. The setting itself is also carefully constructed to be ideally fertile ground for Gamma to introduce the modern innovations that Sid told her about from Japan, like chocolate and burgers. From the gaslit buildings and streets, which still carry horse-drawn carriages, to the massive steam engines that now connect its various cities, to the primitive guns wielded by bandits and soldiers, this is a world clearly in the throes of a pre-electric industrial revolution. One where massive societal change comes in a matter of years, not decades, and it's hardly surprising to see the nature of commerce, culture, or cuisine shift overnight. On an aesthetic level, too, the blend of early modern industrial elements and scientific knowledge with full-blown magic gives the series a rare and enticing vibe similar to that of Fullmetal Alchemist, which is most certainly a great move from a marketing perspective, as everyone loves Fullmetal Alchemist. But what I love most about Eminence's setting is how all those distinct aesthetic elements are themselves incorporated into the narrative and action. I mean, you can't just put a train in an anime and not have people fight on top of it, so that much was probably a given, but the way the school's gaslight system is used to demolish it in spectacularly pyrotechnic fashion at the end of the second arc was a very satisfying surprise. And I'm still not done praising the setting, because that system even works on a symbolic level. I mean, think about it. Could there be a more perfect way to light the setting of a story where the protagonist is gaslighting literally everyone, including himself? I think not. Okay, that English colloquialism did only recently rise to prominence, so it's highly unlikely that Daisuke Aizawa actually intended that connotation in his original 2018 web novel, but it is exactly the sort of coincidence that Shadow would take full credit for if you pointed it out to him. And also, I lied! The term originated in a popular movie from 1944, so it's totally plausible that the Japanese might already know what gaslighting is. And not only is it plausible, but here's a Japan Times article proving that they do. Checkmate, atheists! The wisdom of the shadows knows no bounds. On that note, I adore how the series uses 4 of the original 7 shadows to disseminate Sid's wisdom from Earth into its broader fantasy setting. With Ada rapidly modernizing technology and architecture, Gamma selling the results of her R&D along with modern food and consumer goods in her modern department stores, Epsilon proliferating the classical piano pieces that are so essential to his Eminence's aesthetic, and Beta ensuring that everyone everyone in the world gets his Dragon Ball and Shakespeare references by plagiarizing her way into a successful writing career. The concept of striking it rich in an isekai world with knowledge from our real one is a popular non-violent alternative to the action-oriented wish fulfillment we typically see in the genre. But no matter how OP a Protag-kun gets, it inevitably strains our suspension of disbelief if he or she is too successful in too many areas, especially if he's also out kicking ass and taking names with his superpowered fantasy powers. But if you have half of Protag-kun's harem live that fantasy for him, then you can just go whole hog on it in any way that you want. And you can even make a very funny joke out of him being jealous of all of their success. But again, all this goes beyond pure entertainment value and actually helps to strengthen the structure of the plot. Epsilon's status as an acclaimed, in-demand concert pianist puts her in a perfect position to spy on the world's upper crust. Beta's career as an author provides cover for her to research topics that might otherwise get the cult's attention, and to write her epic Shadow-sama fanfic on the side where she replaces every other waifu in the show with herself. Gamma's business acumen generates funding and political capital for the organization to take advantage of, and Eta invents the gadgets. That one's pretty self-explanatory. The girls of Shadow Garden are all rich, varied, and flawed characters who each contribute to the functioning of the organization and the progression of the plot in distinctive and meaningful ways. And the same can be said for basically every other recurring character in the show, most of whom are also kick-ass women. I'm not about to pretend this anime is some empowering work of feminist art. The girls of Shadow Garden also all wear skin-tight magic slime suits that can make huge fake boobs if they want them, and frequently melt off their bodies due to various magic shenanigans. And the semi-feral wolf girl in particular has a habit of turning most of her clothes into huge weapons, Bayonetta style, leaving only a teeny tiny bikini to frame her rippling lady abs. None of which I'm complaining about, to be clear, but I can see why someone else might. Also, the series starts off with like 4 different damsel kidnappings in the space of 3 episodes, plus another 7 implied off-screen, and that definitely is a lot much, but if you dismiss this anime out of hand on those grounds, you would be throwing out a lot of strong, self-motivated babes, all of whom have significant plot agency, and a few of whom are serious rivals to the protagonist, along with all that ecchi bathwater. God, I want to drink it so bad. What was I talking about again? Right, the characters, which are almost universally fantastic. Anyone with any sort of speaking role in this show is clearly following their own independent path through its world, and whenever those paths happen to intersect with the main plot, they always have a clear, character-motivated impact on it. As I watched the series, I was pleasantly surprised time and again to see characters I'd all but forgotten pop their heads back up in unexpected places, or reveal new layers to their previous actions. And fans of the source material can tell you that every character from every episode will be fair game for callbacks and comebacks as we move into Season 2. Of course, not every recurring character is going to play a significant role in the plot. Sid picked his best friends, Potato and Skell Ettel, specifically for their uncanny ability to never be doing anything remotely useful or plot relevant. And there are plenty of other dudes with dumb puns for names who are just there to help fill out a crowd or move a scene along. But you need crowd filler like that to make a world feel lived in, and the sheer levels of dumbness the show is willing to shoot for with these one-off gag characters, like the baseball knight in catcher armor who holds his sword like a bat, makes even them a lot more memorable than your average anime background goon. And in particular, the lengths to which Skell goes to be completely worthless in the final arc of Season 1 make for some of its funniest moments. moments. But even discounting all of those throwaway characters, Eminence's cast is impressively vast, varied, and complex, which is vital in a story about competing conspiracies with hidden agendas. If Eminence's plot didn't have such a staggering number of moving parts, its whole vibe would fall apart, and the many twists revealed about those conspiracies and the history of the world, most of which will sound fairly familiar if you've seen enough anime or played enough JRPGs, would be exponentially less impactful and exciting. Between its wealth of characters and all its rich veins of lore, The Eminence in Shadow is just so good at creating that feeling that there's way too much going on to keep track of it all, which makes all the competing masterminds feel all the mastermindier. But because our main perspective character is more or less completely caught up in his own bullshit throughout all of that, we're not forced to feel overwhelmed by any of it. Kinda like how Doom Guy's obsessive focus on demon murder allowed id Software to cram an obscene amount of world-building detail into Doom 2016, for those who want to look for it, without it ever threatening to bog down the plot. It's a clever demonstration of how the right narrative framing or tone can allow a writer to effectively have their cake and eat it too. And one of many reasons I think any aspiring authors watching this anime should take copious notes. That's not to say the script and characters are completely airtight though. At first, it's a little hard to buy that Cid could really be completely unaware that both Shadow Garden and the Cult of Diablos are real, considering just how many girls he rescues from them before the story even begins. But don't you worry, as it goes on, it only gets exponentially harder to believe. Like, this guy solved multiple kidnappings that led to secret underground cult labs, defeated a terrorist attack on his own school, blown up 2 cities, become an accessory to regicide, and murdered multiple guys who directly referenced the cult before bulking up with demon pills, and he still thinks all of it's just an elaborate LARP his childhood friends set up around some random crimes that were happening? I mean, yeah, it does all line up with a bunch of nonsense he ad-libbed off the top of his head based on random items around a room, so it makes sense that he'd find it hard to believe it's true, but all of those items were from the same Cult of Diablos caravan that was trafficking Alpha, so he didn't actually pull all of that out of his ass. He filtered real clues through his mental framework of chunibyo cliches to reach a conclusion. And given how Cid consistently sees proof that this world tends to adhere to such cliches, he really should be able to figure it out with just a bit of thought. As a counterpoint to that line of logic, though, it's funnier if he doesn't, so he doesn't. Checkmato da once again, atheist Tachi. Now, some of you might accuse me of making excuses for a weakness in the show's writing there, but I'd argue that Eminence's awareness of what exactly its nature as a trashy comedy lets the serious bits get away with is actually one of its greatest strengths, because that choice doesn't just have entertainment value within the narrative. By making Cid be kind of a dumb guy about this one specific thing and go along with other things just for the fun of it, the show absolves him of any obligation to solve all its problems with all his powers, allowing other characters to actually do shit without having to fall back on the stale waiting for Goku formula. Additionally, because Cid is LARPing as a cryptic dickhead anti-hero purely for the fun of it, he has no motivation to clear up any tragic misunderstandings that might need to happen to advance the story. In fact, in the climactic 2-on-1 battle with Iris and Beatrix, he's actively incentivized to confuse matters further just so he can enjoy a good fight and finally try out the evil laugh he's been practicing. Which means he doesn't have to waste any time saying, "Wait, you don't understand! Perv asshat brainwashed the king!" And as a bonus, Iris doesn't end up being unintentionally characterized as a stupid, stubborn jackass for not listening just so a fight can happen. His absurd characterization ends up shielding the integrity of all the other characters from necessary plot contrivances that might otherwise damage them. And he's able to get away with it every single time because From the audience's perspective, Sid's distinct mix of total genre awareness and total situational ignorance is endlessly fun. We don't ever want him to stop being the kind of guy who'd actively try to avoid all the protagonisty waifus after his canonically massive just to keep up his NPC persona, or the kind of guy who'd waste precious hours in the middle of a political crisis dragging a grand piano down to the most aesthetic spot in the sewers just so the heroine can stumble upon him dramatically playing Moonlight Sonata, because that whole bit is just so darn fun. But what's especially neat about Sid's propensity for LARPing, from a writer's perspective at least, is how, in addition to being exceptionally funny, it allows him to fill whatever role the story needs of him, and in so doing, show us different sides of himself that keep his mostly static character from getting too stale. Across 3 different tournament/battle festival arcs in this first season, he's able to tick 3 very different tropes off his seemingly endless bucket list. Firstly, he plays the nameless jobber who loses in the first round in spectacular fashion to make the heroine look cooler. Maybe a little too spectacular in retrospect, considering the impression he leaves on Rose by using all 48 of his ultimate mob forms in one match, ultimately leading to him being signed up for another unwanted attention-grabbing slot in the next Magic fighting tournament type thing. But with some quick thinking, he was able to turn that situation around too by turning into Shadow and playing the classic tournament crashing interloper. But of course, the final and biggest tournament arc, where Sid chooses to don a 3rd persona so he can do the whole dark horse who beats everyone unexpectedly bit without compromising his secret identity, is far and away the most fun the show has with his character. Watching him juggle all 3 roles like Archie on a date so he can help Rose win the tournament, maintain his cover, and not piss off his yandere One-chan is a laugh riot in and of itself, and the glee he takes in extracting carefully manufactured reactions from the audience in his performance as Mundane Man makes for an excellent parody of the whole tournament arc trope. I especially enjoyed watching him ponder how he'd end it all, contemplating different cliched routes his character could go down in the final battle, only to have Rose make the choice for him and take the story in a more interesting direction. By having Sid constantly try to shoot for and construct the most dramatic scenarios possible in any given situation without ever putting himself directly at the center of that drama, the story is able to keep the goals of its funny and serious elements aligned, and I think both sides are much stronger for it. The humor also allows that massive complex cast I was talking about to function a lot more efficiently than it otherwise might in a more consistently serious anime. In just the 2nd episode, before the plot proper has even had a chance to start, Sid has an entire family plus 7 named subordinates and has to face a minor villain with his own motivations, all of whom need to be juggled by the script in a tight 20 minutes while it's busy laying groundwork for the show's whole premise and building up its setting. By painting them all with broad comedic strokes and stereotypes, though, the show is able to leave a memorable impression of each one that it can come back to fill in later. Even though she doesn't get much screen time after episode 2, for instance, the characterization of Sid's sister Claire as, at first, a serious young swordsman with a bit of a brother complex, and later, when they're grown up, essentially a yandere, implies an entire off-screen arc. Clearly, Sid's continuous efforts to distance himself from all her protagonisty goings-on have left her feeling hurt and neglected by the brother she loves so much, and his carefully calculated NPC slackery has made her increasingly worried for his future. And all that has gradually twisted her innocent joy and pride at being an older sister into something much darker, which is, of course, very funny on its face, but also Shadow creates an impression of persistent character depth that will make it feel natural if and when Claire does step out of the background and into a more substantial role in the story. You can see the show employ a similar trick with Rose Oriana, who's introduced in the first arc as just your typical over-serious student council president type, in conflict with Claire after Sid's arrest, funnily enough. Then, in the second arc, even as Sherry is busy taking the lead, the show adds many layers to her character in just a few scenes. Her earnestness becomes the butt of the joke when she indulges our non-hero in trying out all of his background character pratfall moves back to back. Then that joke gets even funnier when, in her naive innocence, she's convinced that he fought so hard and ultimately took a terrorist's sword for her because he has a crush on her. When the stakes of the story are raised, though, the love she believes he had for her believably motivates her to lead the students' counterattack on the invaders and help save the day. And when we move into the next arc, her single-minded and one-sided drive to unstar-cross the love between herself and the unwilling background character creates a situation where Shadow has to make an appearance to cover his alter ego's ass, moving the whole story forward. Most of that's played for laughs, and she's very much a supporting character in the Holy Ground infiltration arc, which is all about the Shadow Garden girls and Aurora the Witch. But because of those moments, when Rose finally does step into the secondary protagonist spotlight during the Bushin Festival, it feels fully earned, and her goofy desperation to make Sid a viable marriage candidate ends up being cast in a new, more serious light by the revelation that she'd otherwise be doomed to marry a dude named Perv Asshat. Man, even when I'm trying to talk up the intricacies of its characters, there's just no getting around how trashy the Eminence in Shadow really is. But then, it's not like it makes even the slightest effort to hide it, and in fact, that's exactly what makes it such a strong story. Trash is ultimately just another mode of anime storytelling, and like any mode of storytelling, it carries expectations with it that a skilled storyteller can use and subvert to delight and surprise their audience at every turn, which is exactly what this series does. It's easy to write the Eminence in Shadow off as nothing more than oddly likable, yet fundamentally worthless garbage. But that's exactly what he wants you to think, so you don't catch on to his powerful secrets. He, of course, being Daisuke Aizawa, whose original books you can get on Bookwalker, just saying. And I'd seriously recommend them, or this anime, to anyone who wants to better understand and wield the powers of character writing and story structure. Or anyone who's ever waited their whole life to say, "Ha ha ha ha! That was just an after image, you fool!" I'm Geoff Thew, professional cringelord, and I categorically refuse to apologize for it.